good enough?
I can see it.
Good. All right.
Well, I think I can start. That says 10. Yeah?
I'll also dim the center so you can see it
Okay,
better.
awesome. Oh, I have a
We
clicker.
can turn it back up and work.
I'm also not used to having a clicker. This is a very
We're high tech.
advanced, yeah. All right, well, I am Amber. I'm from the Dane County Humane Society. I'm very excited to talk with you all today about what we do at the shelter. And then at the end of my presentation, I will walk around with our animals that I brought today so you all get a chance to meet them. Has anybody ever been to the Humane Society before? Yeah, a couple? Okay. Did you adopt animals or, yeah, sometimes we have volunteers that have volunteered there. A lot of people have been at the shelter. We've been around for 100 years as of last year. So it actually got started in the mayor's wife's basement back in 1921. She started a little rescue, and just her and some volunteers, they took in animals that needed help and took care of them in their basement, and then it was kind of just a foster network of people that loved animals. And then in the 60s, we moved into this shelter that was on Pennsylvania Avenue, and then in 2006, we moved into this shelter. So this is where we are now. It is, I guess, you're on 51, I believe, just almost until you hit the belt line right off the Stoughton Road. So yeah, it took me a weird way to get here, but I think I could have just hopped down one road and been right here. So it is a beautiful facility. We have 29 acres. So this is our main shelter, the main entrance, and that houses our adoptable animals. It has our veterinary clinic, and we have a bunch of other great spaces there to take care of the animals. We also have a wildlife rehabilitation center that is a separate facility on our property that has a big barn where we care for the wildlife, but then I believe 20 smaller structures where we house wildlife, like to get them used to the outdoors, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. We also have a barn on our land that can house farm animals, and then we have a special felines and treatment center that is separate from our shelter, but where we can help cats with ringworm in particular, since that is a very contagious disease and we wouldn't want it to spread to the other cat populations, so that is a special thing about our shelter as well. We also have a lot of trails that are very fun to walk dogs around in our woods and marsh, so it is a beautiful facility. And we help a lot of animals there. So at any time at our main shelter, we can hold almost 300 companion animals, so dogs, cats, critters, sometimes snakes. And then we have 6 stalls in the barn. Usually we use the barn for chickens. We get peacocks, quails, lots of farm birds. We don't see the cows and horses as often anymore. But yeah, lots of animals. And then to help those animals, we need a lot of people. So our motto is helping people help animals. We have about 80 staff members that help throughout the shelter, and then almost 800 volunteers. So we really rely on our volunteers. Our volunteer program is very robust. Most of our volunteers commit to a weekly shift, and they have to commit to over 6 months. So we get a lot of people that have volunteered for years and years and years, and then staff too that hang around. We have surprisingly, a lot of staff members that have been there at least 10 years, so really knowledgeable people. And then our staff and volunteers help with everything from helping with our adoption center, so they help the animals get adopted. They help in our veterinary clinic. They help with the wildlife. So every part of what we do is helped by volunteers. Oliver is getting very comfortable with you all, so this is good. So I wanted to spend most of today talking about our wildlife center. A lot of people don't know that we do care for so many wildlife at the Dane County Humane Society. So I like to say that we have our side that everybody knows about where we take care of dogs and cats. But we also have a wild side, which is our wildlife center. So I think last year we helped over 3,000 wild animals in our wildlife center, and that was over 150 different species of animals. So whereas our general shelter staff are really knowledgeable at how to care for dogs and cats and a few other critters, our wildlife center staff are, I think, some of the smartest people I've ever met, because they need to know how to care for, feed, house, and treat over 150 different wild animals. So it is remarkable what they do And we also get to benefit, why I love having a slideshow up is, since we have so many wild animals that are at our facility, we really benefit by getting all of these amazing pictures that would be impossible to get in the wild. So I think, okay, so our most common species that we see, so we help all native Wisconsin wildlife at our wildlife center. So our most common is the mallard duck. We get a lot of waterfowl that are ingesting toxic materials in water. So they'll find some old fishing tackle or trash, things like that. They'll eat it and get really sick, or we'll have to do surgery to remove that. So that is one of the most common reasons we would get a duck into our facility. In the springtime, we also get a lot of ducklings that have, maybe their parents have been hurt or harmed and they're orphaned, so we get like hundreds and hundreds of baby birds and ducks. It's a very cute time, but it is a lot of work. The second most common is the robin, which I'm sure you all could have guessed, one of the most common birds in Wisconsin. And a lot of our like songbirds and smaller birds, they come in because they get struck or they fly into windows a lot, and they'll have some head trauma. We get a lot of broken wings, so we suspect that, it's hard to tell how those things happened, but maybe a cat got them, or they got hurt in another way. But those are some of the common reasons. And we also get a lot of wood ducks, which I am surprised that it's our third top animal that we see, because I don't see them that often in the wild, but they're there. They just blend in really well, but they are beautiful creatures. And then, of course, the rabbit. So we get a lot of rabbits in the springtime, just like with our ducklings and baby birds. A lot of baby rabbits that have been orphaned somehow. We also, one of our things that we teach about a lot is if, some people will see a little nest of baby rabbits and think that they've been abandoned and they need some sort of help, but a lot of adult animals leave their young throughout the day so they don't attract any predators. So if you ever notice a nest of baby rabbits in your yard, what we would say to do is kind of look at what the, if they look healthy, so like these rabbits look really plump and well fed, they're probably getting taken care of. But to test it, you can always put some sticks, kind of lay them over the nest, or some like long pieces of grass. And if it is disturbed after 2 days, that means the parents are checking in on them and caring for them. But if not, or if the rabbits do look unhealthy or not well fed, that's when you should call us, and they might have gotten abandoned or something happened to their parents. So that is one of the most common reasons, though, that they come in. And then bats. We have a lot of bats. These are pictures of big brown bats in Wisconsin, and they're very common, but I believe they are endangered. And they are very susceptible to something called white nose syndrome, which is a fungus that affects bats when they're hibernating and makes them come out of hibernation early, which means they don't have as many resources. They use they build up that fat before hibernation, and if they come out of hibernation early, then they're using those fat stores really soon, and they might not survive the winter. So we try to help them with the white nose syndrome and help them survive the winter. Since they are endangered, we do care a lot about our bats, and they help the mosquitoes, help get rid of the mosquitoes, which we love. And then finally, our last most popular animal is the house finch, which I just love the pictures that we get, so I had to include that one. Okay, so I mentioned this a little bit before, but wildlife mainly come to us for some reasons due to human interaction. So we get a lot of animals that were hit by cars, window collisions, they're orphaned due to some kind of pet interaction, and then a big reason is ingesting some kind of toxic materials. And here are some examples of animals that came into our wildlife center for some of these reasons, but this is actually a red-tailed hawk that was shot. And I don't know if anybody's seen the news lately, but there was an eagle that actually just passed away because he got shot near Milwaukee. So it happens more often than it should. It's actually illegal to shoot birds of prey like eagles and hawks, but sometimes we can help them, so we were able to remove that bullet and rehabilitate it, get the wings stronger, get them used to the wild again. So sometimes it works out, but it is a lot of education on hunter education is important, and letting people know that it is not okay to shoot those kinds of birds. And then this middle picture is a blue heron that actually got tried to eat some trash, and that is some trash wrapped around its beak, and there was some trash wrapped around its wings, so it couldn't fly away. It actually got stuck in a dog park. Yeah, which is not good. The dogs were very excited about the bird being there, but luckily the owners of the dogs that were at the park that day called us, and we were able to get the bird out and remove the trash and release it back to the wild. And then that far right picture over there, that is a bird nest that fell out of a tree in the springtime when someone was clipping their branches back, which is a very common thing. But we highly suggest only clipping branches during the late fall, early winter, so that you don't accidentally drop some bird nests to the ground, because spring is the most common time for the nests to be in the trees. Any questions so far about anything I'm talking about? Yeah, that one is a very small nest, because you can see the size, just one hand. So when an animal, how would you get an animal to the wildlife center? First, someone usually calls our wildlife center asking about an animal that they see that might need help. So it might be the nest of baby rabbits or a bird that isn't flying, things like that. They would call us, and we have some really knowledgeable staff and volunteers that answer all of their questions and determine if that animal actually needs our help, or if it should be left out in the wild, or if there's something that you could do at home to care for that animal. Usually the best thing for the animals is to stay in the wild, so we really try to keep them in the wild at all costs. But if it does need to come in, we would give very thorough instructions on how to bring that animal in. And every animal that comes into our wildlife center gets a full vet exam. We have veterinarians on staff, but we also partner with UW Veterinary School. So they're teaching their vet students to do shelter medicine, which is something a lot of veterinarians don't learn about, but also wildlife medicine, which is even more.
What do you?
So doing veterinary work in a shelter, in an animal shelter. So most veterinary students, they are just kind of learning about pet care and how to help people with their pets, or at a farm. But all of the UW vet students do a rotation at the Humane Society, so they get to see kind of a different perspective of working with the shelter animals. So this is a snapping turtle getting an exam by one of our vet interns, I believe. So they're trying to figure out what's going on with them. They make a plan for how to rehabilitate them. And then we have to house all of our animals. So these are some of my favorite pictures. So this is, we have a bunch of, there's kind of different steps to our wildlife center. So the first step is when they are really needing a lot of treatment and monitoring. We have more of what you'd expect at a vet clinic, smaller cages, like this one, this white cage, so that we can monitor them. This snowy owl actually had a broken wing, so he's in a smaller enclosure so that he doesn't try to flop his wings and harm things and not let himself heal. But once they get more healed and they're feeling a little bit better, we move them to these outdoor pens so they can start smelling the smells and hearing the outdoor things and feeling the elements and start moving a little bit more. We also have flight pens where we have cameras set up that we can kind of watch and make sure the birds are learning how to fly again. We do hunting tests to make sure they are able to hunt, and work them up to a point where we feel confident that they'll be able to survive in the wild by themselves.
What's that white stuff behind the bird? The white, all that white.
Oh, like over here?
Yeah.
I think it's just light hitting into
okay,
the,
okay.
Yeah, because it's just a white kind of box, pretty much. And then this is a picture of our squirrel boxes. So when squirrels come in, we have these awesome boxes that a lot of Boy Scouts and volunteers make for us. And while they stay with us, they're in that box. And then actually when we release them to the wild, we put that box up so that they have something familiar to them and they can start feeling more comfortable in the wild. And it's just really cute. We also have to feed them. So this is a major part of our Wildlife Center staff and volunteers' job every day, especially in the springtime. So when we have baby birds and baby mammals in the spring, they have to feed them about every 45 minutes throughout the whole day. So it is so much work to try to replicate that natural, mothering instinct, which is why, if at all possible, we try to keep the baby animals with their parents in the wild. But when they have to come in, we have all these wonderful staff and volunteers and interns that help us take care of them. We do some really fun things to try to make sure they stay wild. So a lot of the times when we have baby birds, we try to block everything so they can't see the humans. We also have puppets. So they put this puppet on their hand. I should get one to use it during presentations because it's so cool. But the puppet kind of looks like a mother bird that has one of these little syringes, and then it can, they reach in so that they're associating, the food with an adult bird, not a human. Yeah. And then we try to provide enrichment, so we try to make things as interesting as possible during their stay. So we try to make things look natural. With this tundra swan has some grasses and even an old Christmas tree that someone donated. Try to make it feel like it's the wild, even though it really isn't. And then I love this example. So this is a little gosling who was all alone, left behind, didn't have his family with him, but it's really important for goslings to be part of a flock. So we gave him a mirror so that he could have a friend until he was ready to be released into the wild. And when we release an orphaned gosling or other like baby ducks, things like that, we actually just go out and find a good suitable group of existing goslings that are being cared for in the wild, and we just kind of scoot it in and it gets adopted, and usually the mother geese and father geese don't even notice. So yeah, very cute. So obviously a big part of what we do is treating animals' medical needs. So this is a fox with mange, which is a disease that's really uncomfortable. It's very itchy on the skin. So this is when it first came in, and it is very uncomfortable. You can see how unhealthy its fur looks, but after we treat it, we give it some medicated baths, time to recover. So this is that same fox looking a lot more alert. Obviously, the fur is looking a little bit better, but we had to shave him so that he could recover a little bit faster, but he's looking better. And then finally, once we do all of those steps to make sure they're suitable to go back to the wild and they're ready to hunt and survive, things like that, we would finally release them. So this is that same fox getting released, not looking back, excited to go back into the wild. And you can see like that improvement on the tail, and he just looks so much healthier. And then I have two examples where I actually have videos, because the release videos are one of my favorite things. I've seen 3 releases in person, and we did an owl release recently, and then I actually went to the Aldo Leopold Nature Center. They were having a camp there with a bunch of kids, and I was able to work with our wildlife center to bring in a bunch of ducks and songbirds, and they released them at the nature center for all the kids to see, and it is something so special. So I brought some of that here today. So this is an eagle who we have a really awesome video for when we released him, but he was found on the side of the road. It's suspected that he was hit by a car while he was eating some roadkill. So we had to rehabilitate him. I think he had some wing damage, but nothing too bad. But eventually we were able to release him, and let's see if my video works. Might need to click it. Okay, there we go. It's a little small. And it is in slow motion. I get that question a lot. He's moving a lot faster without the slow motion.
What is it?
It's a bald eagle. I think there's and I always love seeing our volunteers' faces when they release the animals after they've cared for them for so long. It's really special. I think it's going to show another view in a second. Maybe not. Okay, and then I have another example. So this is a Blandings turtle. He was actually our longest patient we've ever helped at the Wildlife Center. He stayed with us for 3 years. So he was found in after a prairie burn. So that's something that people do to restore habitat, and it's really good for the environment, but sometimes animals get stuck in them. So he was found badly burnt. His shell was almost completely gone, and he came into the wildlife center. They did not think he was going to survive. It was a very he was a really good candidate for humane euthanasia, which is something we have to do when we cannot humanely help the animals. But our wildlife staff and some specialist vets at UW kind of came together and said, okay, let's give it a try. He was still eating really well. He had a really healthy appetite despite being so unhealthy and visibly unhealthy. But he was still eating, so that was like a little glimmer of hope. And it took 3 years. He got better. He was one of the most loved patients at the wildlife center, and it was a lot of building up that shell, and he couldn't get released sooner because the shell wasn't healthy enough to release him in the summer when it is the best time to release the turtles. But finally this summer, he was well enough. So this is right before he got released when he was still in the wildlife center. But his shell, still is a little discolored and looks like it still has a little bit of work to do, but it is a full shell, and he was acting real healthy. So I think this is my favorite video that we have. So they had a big event where they released him, and they invited all the volunteers that had cared for him for 3 years. There were a lot of tears, but they were all so excited to see him go. He seems pretty excited too. Yeah, that one isn't sped up either. That one's normal speed. Yeah. So I love seeing the videos like that. Just like the story coming from start to see how they came in to finish is just incredible. And then I mentioned this before, but one of the most important things we're doing at the Wildlife Center is actually training the next generation of wildlife helpers. So we have a lot of interns that are just going to school. We get people that are getting their bachelor's degree at UW in some kind of science, or they're just exploring their interests, and then they come to the Wildlife Center for an internship and become wildlife rehabilitators. They learn how amazing the work is, and they just spend a little bit of time doing it, and then it really sticks with them. We also have apprentices who do a little bit more of a robust program. It's kind of like a full-time job for a while, and then they actually get their license to be a wildlife rehabilitator at the end of it. At a smaller scale, what I do, I teach a lot of kids about wildlife, and not so much about trying to convince them to work at our wildlife center, but just what they can do in their backyard. What they can just pick up trash, or leave wildlife alone, respecting wildlife. And there are so many. I think the majority of the kids that I present to already know most of this stuff. So it is so inspiring for me to see that these kids are already learning all of, they know more than me a lot of the times about wildlife and how to help nature, things like that. So that's very inspiring. This is one of our camps that we had over the summer, and me up there trying to present to them. So yeah, I think. Oh yeah, and then we have Girl Scouts come in, Boy Scouts, that do workshops where they get their animal helpers badge, so they learn about our wildlife center and then how to help animals at home. We also have a ton of other ways. If you're inspired to help the wildlife center or the shelter, we have a lot of fun ways to do so. If you're into crocheting or knitting, I've mentioned how many baby birds we got in the spring, but every little bird gets one of these nests, which I think are really cute, but they're also very useful. So that's a really fun project. And then I think one of my favorite parts of my jobs is there are just kids that, instead of getting birthday presents for their birthday, they ask for donations for the shelter. That's what this little girl did, which I think is amazing, because when I was a kid, I would have never given up birthday gifts. To do that, it's just so inspiring. So I get to go up and meet them and introduce them to some of our classroom animals and show them how they're helping out the animals and things like that. So yeah, any questions before I bring around my animal friends here? Well, while I'm walking around with the animals, if you have any questions, feel free to just ask me when I'm walking around, or if you have stories you would like to tell. I love hearing people's stories about how they've helped wildlife, or their favorite pets, anything. That's the favorite part of my job too. So I brought 2 animals here. I'll probably get Oliver out soon since he's getting used to things. Hi. He's a little feisty. Okay, so Oliver is a guinea pig. Some lettuce while he's talking. Guinea pigs are a very common pet. Has anybody ever had a guinea pig or family that has had guinea pigs? Okay, they're a lot of work. I grew up with guinea pigs too. They're very messy, so I have to spend a lot of time kind of warning kids and parents about how much work they are, because when they meet them, they're like, oh my gosh, they're so cute and they're so perfect, but they're very messy. So Oliver actually came to the shelter last spring. He was surrendered with his little family. A lot of the guinea pigs we get at the shelter are, people have pets, they don't realize that one is a female or one is a male, and they get accidental pregnancies, and they don't know what to do with it. I don't think I would know what to do with it either. So that's how we got Oliver, and it is actually very hard to gender little critters like this, because we actually thought Oliver was a girl when he was a baby too. So there was already enough drama, and then after a few months, there was actually more babies because we put him in with another female. And so that's how we got Winston, which is the other guinea pig that we have in the shelter. So all of this was happening during my summer camp when I had 40 kids each week, and trying to avoid talking about the guinea pig drama that we were having in the classroom was a lot of fun. But Oliver's very sweet. He is a little bit more shy and reserved, but he is my sweet little guinea pig friend. His son is a lot feistier. He's very adventurous. That's why I mentioned earlier when I had the same setup for Winston, his son, at my last presentation, and he was trying to escape the whole time. And so he loves roaming around. Like if he was here, he would want to go explore everywhere, whereas Oliver's fine hanging out in his igloo. So they're both very fun. Winston is, I like to tell kids that he's a teenager and he's going through his teenage phase because he likes to follow Oliver around and steal his vegetables. And he does a lot of dominating behavior where Winston will stand on the igloo when Oliver's on the floor and tell him that that's his igloo and don't come near this igloo. But most of the kids that I tell that to, they're always like, I'll never do that when I'm a teenager. Why would you be mean to your dad? So I think that's pretty sweet too. So I'm gonna walk him around and you're welcome to pet him. I don't suggest petting near his mouth because he's a little bitey right now. And if you don't want to pet him, you don't have to, but he is very soft. Yes. Yeah, he's an Abyssinian guinea pig, which I guess if you had show guinea pigs, this is the kind of guinea pig you would show. I didn't know that there was a such thing as show guinea pigs before I started working, and he sheds too. Yeah. Hi. That's okay. Oh yeah. I was told they have to have at least 8 squirrels to be show pigs, and he does not. Okay. Very cute. I don't know if he'd be a good show pig. I don't know either. I think he's a little small for a guinea pig.
So we did measure.
This is Oliver.
Oh, he's cute.
You can pet him if you'd like.
I don't know if my dogs and cats would like this.
They'll probably be interested in the smells.
You've got a cute little face.
Yeah, I think that picture up there is one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken. It's very him.
How long do guinea pigs live?
They can live up to 8 years. So that's another kind of warning I give to parents is, you got to know that this is a big commitment. Whereas we also have rats in our classroom, and rats only live about 3 years. So while that might be kind of sad to go through that with your kids, I think it probably is a better better for time commitments.
We were told we were to drag him in there for 6, and now we know it's 15.
Whoa, that is impressive. That must mean he's well cared for.
He's going with our kids to college.
That'll be fun in the dorm.
My daughter and husband had 2 pigs, they're sisters. And so when they're out of town, then Grandpa and I had big duty.
Oh, fun.
And
Do you enjoy it?
I do, but they poop all the time.
They do everywhere.
You just have to clean it.
Yeah, we have volunteers that help us care for our classroom animals, and we clean out their cage every single day, and it's still gross.
And it's just, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was not very, when I was a kid, I was horrible at cleaning their cage, so gotta have realistic expectations. And rats can be litter box trained, so I'm always trying to convince people to adopt rats instead. Though I love you, but.
That's our
You good? Oh, yeah.
And the noises he made, we could tell what he wanted.
I love the noises they make. That's actually a lesson I teach the kids is talk about dog communication, cat communication, and I throw in some.
And if his water bottle is empty, my son will take it and whack it.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yes.
Did he scream when the fridge opened or when he ordered vegetables?
I found a lot, you know.
And we discussed
Even though he's more timid and shy than Winston, he's a lot better at this than he is for some reason. I thought Winston was going to be a lot more brave, but he was not. Does anybody have any questions about Oliver or guinea pigs at all? They're very fun. They can be very sweet, but they, I've known him since he was a baby, and he still doesn't trust me. So that's another. I love them so much, but you got to really be patient with guinea pigs. And I always see these videos online of people with guinea pigs that they can teach them tricks, and they will come up to them for cuddles, and I don't know how to get him to love me like that, but I think it takes more time than I have in a day. So, they're amazing animals. They're just a little bit of work, Yes. Okay. Maybe I'll give him some vegetables for his work. Yeah, so usually, you might have heard me mentioning this, but when they hear anything like bag rustling or like a page ripping, anything that sounds like they might be getting vegetables, they usually start screaming. They're so excited. He's not doing it right now because I think he's a little nervous, but yeah. Yeah, it's like a wee, 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 wee. Sometimes it's like they just ate like a whole bag of vegetables, and you're just flipping a page 10 feet away, and they start screaming and getting so excited. Like, it's not time for that, buddy. Look how brave you are. Okay, well, next I'm going to get my snake out. So Jake has been at the shelter since 2012, so a little, what? Yeah, 10, 11 years. He's 17 years old, so he is older for a snake. They live, I mentioned this earlier, they live like 20, 22 years if we're lucky. Let's see, you're going to like this because I'm warm. So he's almost 5 feet long. But, so since he's been with us for 10 years, he actually, he's met like thousands of people, and he is very, very social. He loves meeting people. And he is just so cool. I never held a snake before I started this job, and now I think we're pretty good friends. I'm very comfortable with it now. But probably just with Jake. I'm a little less comfortable with other snakes. But I know he is very trustworthy. He's never bitten anybody. And he's actually a constrictor snake, so he's not venomous. If he was in the wild to kill his prey, he would like squeeze them, not bite them really. So he's never bitten anybody, and I don't even know if he's ever wanted to. He's a pretty chill snake. Yeah. So I will walk around, and if you would like to touch him, I highly suggest it because he feels really cool. And a lot of people, if you've never pet a snake before, like they feel a lot different than you might expect. A lot of people expect them to be slimy or like rough, like sandpaper, and he is just smooth. He's a little cold right now because he was in that just with the blankets, but he'll probably warm up as he is absorbing my heat is what he likes to do. Yeah, they come in a bunch of different kinds of colors, but his is my favorite. So he has a big tank at our shelter that's about probably 5 feet tall, 3 feet wide. It's pretty big, and he most of the day he hangs out in there. He's got trees in there and like a basking spot. But he loves getting out and exploring. Like he will climb around the table and slither around the room. And he loves like hanging out with people like this because it's a really good way to get warm. So he likes to put handcuffs on me when I carry him around, which I think is really cute. But one time he wrapped himself around my belt loops. So sometimes he likes to accessorize. Yeah, and they're really not a lot of work. You got to make sure you keep he's a little cold right now. They eat mice. So we buy them from a reptile store. They are frozen, and we just warm them up. And it sounds a little gross. I was really grossed out by it at first, but since he's older, he doesn't eat that often. So when you actually convince him to eat, it's actually kind of nice, and you feel like you did something right. So, no, okay. Yes, they're actually about twice the size of his head. So when he goes to eat, he can actually unhinge his jaw to be able to fit the mouse in his mouth. Which, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm saying all the things that gross people out about you, but you're really cool. Yeah, but I think the hardest thing about caring for any kind of reptile is making sure they have the right kind of heat and humidity. We've been spending a lot of time lately trying to make sure his enclosure is up to our standards of care. So, but otherwise, once you get that figured out, it's very, you can just kind of leave him there for a while. And he likes getting out and interacting with people, but he's also happy to sit under his log for 3 days straight if you really let him. Anybody want to pet him? Yeah, so that's his way of trying to he's kind of sniffing the air. He's flicking air back to his nose so he can kind of sense things. And since there's so many new smells here, it's going a little crazy. And I actually see his eye is starting to get a little cloudy, and that's a sign that he might start shedding soon. So since his eye is a little cloudier, he can't see as well, so he's probably using his tongue even more to see what's going on. Anyone want to pet him? I swear it feels very nice.
Eileen is the brave one.
Ray, did you want to touch him? No?
You want to touch him? He's...
So how can you tell that you said, oh, he likes to get out and meet people. How can you tell that?
It is hard. I'm used to reading dog or cat body language, but once you get to know them, if he was scared, he'd be hiding. He'd try to find a place to hide. He could go up my sleeve, go around my hair and hide, kind of slither away. They would be escaping if he was feeling scared or nervous. But he is curious. He's using his tongue to sniff around. He's not hiding his head. And I think if he was very uncomfortable, he wouldn't be wrapping himself around me. He would be trrying to escape. So, you just kind of...
A lot of wriggling.
Yes, a lot of wriggling, but he's pretty calm right now, and a lot of people are surprised when I talk about the reptiles' personalities in particular. But we had a bearded dragon for 4 years, Apollo, and she just passed away a few weeks ago. And I thought I knew bearded dragons after we had her. She was very calm. She kind of didn't care about anything. She was so relaxed. Sometimes she'd give you like a sassy side eye, like, what are you doing? But otherwise she was just so relaxed. And then after Thanksgiving we got a new bearded dragon who is younger, he's male, and he is the complete opposite of Apollo. So now I feel kind of bad because I told so many parents that bearded dragons were easy to take care of, and they can be, as you probably know, you have a bearded dragon. But Mushu, our new bearded dragon, is difficult. He will try to jump out of your hands when you're holding him. He loves to run around the room and explore. Where Apollo was perfectly fine just sitting on your shoulder for hours. So they're complete opposite personalities, and it's really fun to see the differences, but it's also, yeah, it's been an adventure with him. Yeah, so every animal is different, and it's hard to say, like we could get another corn snake after Jake, and it probably wouldn't be this calm and relaxed.
What did you get him?
We got him, we got him 10 years ago, and somebody surrendered him to the shelter, so they couldn't care for him anymore. Yeah.
And I was going down the basement steps or something, and I found him, met him about halfway down.
Not natural to Wisconsin.
No. They would be, in the wild, they would be found in like New Mexico, Arizona, or northern Mexico.
Well, that's why he wants
Want
to
to pet him?
sit out in the sun.
Yep. They're desert animals.
Hey Jake, how are you? Hey buddy. Wanna come home with me? It's pretty cold in my house.
Sure you don't want to touch
My hands are cold too.
The other animals, like I could maybe be convinced to adopt out, but I would never let Jake leave. He's such an essential part to our education programs. So all the other animals, as you saw with Oliver, he was fine with coming out, but they don't love it. And Jake, I think, actually loves it.
He doesn't like it. My hands are really cold.
Do you want to pet it?
I'm good.
Anybody else? Anyone feeling braver now that they've seen other people pet him?
So loving.
I'll pet him.
Okay, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't let you pet Oliver.
That's okay, I was behind there, I had your phones and stuff. Hi there. Yeah, good to do that.
Yeah, my hands are getting
So,
warm.
so my youngest child has a ball python and a guinea pig.
Oh, fun! Oh, that's perfect for today. So, one of the main parts of my job is camp. So we do day camps during the school year, and then we have summer camp where all summer we have 40 kids come to camp. And so Jake is a camp favorite. He has been for the whole time he's been here. So we actually have, last summer we had a camp counselor on staff who just graduated high school, but she used to go to summer camp when she was a kid. And she remembered everything about Jake. She knew Jake so well, which I thought was really cool. And then we get campers that haven't been there for a few years, but come back and they're like, "Oh, is Jake still there? Is Jake still there?" But we also have somebody that comes to our camps. He owns a snake breeding business in Madison. It's called Key Reptiles, and he brings about 30 ball pythons to camp. They're all in Tupperware containers, and he teaches them about snakes and having snakes as pets. But then he just starts handing kids snakes. So it is one of the most fun but most chaotic and also terrifying days of camp. Because as staff, I'm trying to make sure everybody is caring, respecting the snakes and holding them properly. But when all 20 kids have a snake or two in their hands, I'm just running back and forth, helping a snake get untangled here, making sure someone doesn't throw the snake over there. And yeah, it is hectic, but I think every time we have him come, when the kids are getting picked up by their parents, I hear so often, "Mom, can we get a snake? Dad, can we get a snake?" So
You get a lot of letters from parents.
maybe some unhappy parents. Yeah, it's fun though, and there have been a number of times where families adopt animals after they come to our camp, which is really rewarding. So, yeah. Any questions about Jake or Oliver or anything that?
Are there any animals that you won't take, like a tarantula or?
Good question. So at our shelter, so we will take anything that somebody has as a pet at our shelter. We're actually contracted to do so with Dane County. So whether that means an alligator, if somebody tries to keep an alligator as a pet, which is illegal, so animal control, took the alligator. This has happened a couple times. They're usually babies, luckily. They take them and we have to house them until we figure out what to do with them. So we find a space, I think in someone's office, so they're away from the dogs and cats and critters. But they're not wild, they're not native to Wisconsin, so they don't go to our wildlife center. Only native Wisconsin wildlife go to our wildlife center. So technically they were being kept as a pet, so we had to house them in our shelter and then find a sanctuary for them to go to that was more appropriate. But yeah, so I think we would take anything that's a pet. Sometimes we try to divert it and send it to somewhere more appropriate before it even comes to our shelter. But usually we just make room for it and make it work. At our wildlife center, there are some animals that we are not allowed to admit because of law. There's some interesting licensing laws about wildlife rehabilitation. So, for example, we can't care for skunks because someone 100 years ago lobbied the government to say that skunks are a big rabies risk and we shouldn't be able to rehabilitate them, which they can have rabies, but so can a lot of the other animals that we care for. So there are some silly laws that are another thing our wildlife rehabilitators do. They don't have enough work to do already, but they do a lot of advocating and lobbying. I wouldn't say lobbying particularly, but they are working with the Wisconsin DNR to try to educate them on better laws, better rules that will actually help wildlife. So during COVID, or the beginning of COVID, they weren't allowed to take in bats because they thought bats would be a COVID vector. So instead of bats coming to a licensed wildlife rehabilitator, people were trying to care for them in their homes, which is more dangerous than the bats coming into our facility that we have PPE and we have a lot of protocol to keep things separate and clean. So that was one of the things. I think that recently actually that rule got taken out so that we can care for bats again. So, yeah, but mostly we can take care of most animals.
Do you have any raccoons?
I think raccoons are another one that we are actually not allowed to take care of for similar reasons, rabies. So it's skunks, raccoons, deer because of chronic wasting disease, and there are some other ones. I think some kind of otter that's native to Wisconsin, maybe a river otter, but it's very rare, and that's another COVID, the wild. The weasels, I think weasels and river otters we're not allowed to care for right now because of COVID. But those are rare anyways. Any other questions? Does anybody have any fun wildlife stories they would like to share? I'm really surprised because usually that's everybody wants to tell me about the bat they helped or the time they rescued a duck. And I collect these stories and I use them. All right, well, does anybody want one last time with Jake? Okay. Well, most of you were very brave with him, if not with Oliver. So thank you all for listening. I think that's all I have. If you are ever interested in stopping by the shelter, we are open most days, and you can just kind of walk around and say hi to some of our animals. You can say hi to Jake again in the classroom. Otherwise, we do have some fun events going around the year, and fun ways to help if you wanted to, crochet or knit or get your kids involved in something. We are always looking for fun ways to connect with folks. So, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.